I'm Amelia Winters, 38, and I built a career in operations from the ground up after starting as an entry-level coordinator straight out of college. For years, I supported my husband emotionally, financially, and professionally, helping him launch his startup while putting my own goals on hold. But when he left me for a younger woman, after his company took off, without a conversation, without an apology, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or replaced by someone you poured yourself into? Someone who built their success on your support, then acted like you were never part of it? If that's something you've lived through, share your story in the comments. I'm listening. Before I get into what happened, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your dignity after being used or underestimated, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about finding strength after betrayal. What came next wasn't what anyone expected. My name is Amelia Winters. I'm 38, live in Boston, and last weekend, my ex-husband laughed in my face at my parents' golden anniversary party. What he didn't expect, what no one expected, was what happened next. But to understand the full weight of that moment, I need to start at the beginning, before I knew what it meant to give more than you get. I grew up in a suburb outside Albany, the kind of town where everyone knows your dog's name and strangers shovel your driveway when there's a storm. My parents, Ann and Rick Winters, have been together since high school. They own the local hardware store, Winter Supply, which has been there since 1974. It's the kind of place with creaky wood floors, a bell over the door, and a handwritten cash-only sign that's been there since before I was born. My brother Paul took over the day-to-day years ago, but my parents still come in 5 mornings a week, mostly just to check inventory and chat with regulars. Growing up, their marriage was my blueprint. It wasn't flashy or overly affectionate, but it was consistent. Practical. There were disagreements, but I never saw them disrespect each other. They ran the business, raised 2 kids, paid off the house, and made pancakes every Sunday without ever making it feel like effort. I thought that's what love looked like. Shared grocery lists, divided chores, and a deep trust that no one was going anywhere. I met Aaron my junior year at Northeastern. I was majoring in business administration with a focus on operations. He was in the liberal arts program, studying philosophy but constantly bouncing between majors. The first time we spoke, he asked me if I thought meaning came from structure or spontaneity. I remember laughing, unsure if it was a pickup line or a genuine question. He was sharp, funny, magnetic in that way some people just are, and had this restlessness that made him seem interesting. He didn't know what he wanted, but he said it like that was a strength. We started dating fast. Within a month, he was spending most nights at my apartment. I liked taking care of him, cooking dinners, proofreading his essays, lending him books he never returned. He didn't come from much, and there was a part of me that liked being the steady one, the one with answers. When he got rejected from grad school, I told him maybe academia wasn't his path. Maybe he just needed time to figure it out. I meant it. I believed in him. After graduation, I landed a job at a logistics firm in Boston. Entry level, not glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me a clear ladder to climb. Aaron floated between gigs, retail, food service, a couple of freelance writing projects, but nothing stuck. He said he needed time to find something that felt real. I covered our first apartment's rent while he looked, then our utilities, then groceries. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself this was what couples did. One person lifts when the other stumbles. It's temporary. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. My mom cried. My dad grilled steaks. Aaron made a speech about finding your anchor and ended it by calling me his compass. Everyone said it was poetic. I was just relieved he didn't go off on a tangent about Nietzsche. The first few years of our marriage felt like more of the same. I worked long hours, steadily moving up to a managerial position. Aaron took a course in coding. Then he got obsessed with digital marketing. Then he had an idea for an app, something about helping freelancers manage their invoices more easily. He called it MintLink. He said it was the one. I wanted to believe him. When he asked me to invest in the startup, I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because the money wasn't just sitting there. My grandmother had left me 30 when she passed. I hadn't touched it. My parents always said, emergency fund first, then dreams. But Aaron insisted this was the dream, and that if I believed in him, I'd understand. He didn't say it to guilt me, but it landed that way. I transferred the money. He thanked me with tears in his eyes, promised that when Mintlink blew up, he'd pay me back tenfold. I told him I didn't want repayment, I wanted a partnership. He said, of course. That word of course felt safe at the time, like I'd done the right thing. For the next 18 months, I supported us both. Aaron worked on the app from home, took meetings, joined founder forums, and updated me over dinner with phrases like angel investor interest and early traction. I kept working 50-hour weeks and adjusted to the reality that our dream meant me doing the math on how to stretch my paycheck a little farther each month. The imbalance grew slowly. At first, it was subtle. I'd ask about user growth and get vague answers. He'd say I didn't understand how startups worked. When he started traveling to networking events, I'd ask who was paying, and he'd say it was handled. I believed him because I wanted to. Eventually, the app launched. Quietly, no fanfare, just a few downloads from friends and people in his forums. A month in, nothing had changed. He said it needed time. I waited. One evening, over dinner, I suggested he look into contract work to ease our financial strain. He stared at me for a long time and said, "You're starting to sound like my parents." That was the first time he made me feel like the enemy. I stopped bringing it up. When my company offered me a project lead position, something I'd worked toward for years, I almost didn't take it because I knew it would mean longer hours. But I needed the raise, and a part of me wanted something that was mine. I accepted. Aaron congratulated me with flowers. He posted about it on Facebook, calling me the hardest working woman I know. But at home, the tension was building. He was still chasing funding, still talking about a second version of the app, but our bank account kept shrinking. I offered to help with budgeting. He said he had it under control. That Christmas, I bought my parents a weekend getaway in Maine. Aaron gave me a framed photo of us in college and a promise to take me somewhere special soon. He meant well. But when I looked at the gift, I didn't feel loved. I felt tired. Over time, the things I'd admired in Aaron, his spontaneity, his idealism, his refusal to settle, started to feel like excuses. And the things he once admired in me, my stability, my drive, became the reasons he pulled away. He started avoiding my family gatherings, said they made him feel like he didn't measure up. I told him no one expected anything except kindness and honesty. But I could tell he didn't believe me. The more I held everything together, the more invisible I became in his eyes. If I got frustrated, I was controlling. If I asked questions, I was micromanaging. And yet, every time he hit a dead end, he turned to me. For comfort, for reassurance, for logistics. I gave him those things every time. Looking back now, I see how much I gave away trying to be his foundation. Not just money, or time, or connections. I gave up the right to be fully seen, to be supported in return. I kept waiting for the version of Aaron who'd come back around, who'd say, "Thank you for carrying us, I see you." But that moment never came. Instead, what came was something else. And it would change everything. The shift didn't come in a single moment. There wasn't a big fight or one explosive betrayal that ended everything. What happened with Aaron was slower, almost imperceptible at first. A glance that lingered too long on his phone, an invitation to a work event that never came. I didn't recognize it as distance right away. I thought it was stress. The first time I noticed something different was when he started talking about the ecosystem, not ours, the tech one. "You don't get it," he said when I asked him to explain what that even meant. "Everything's about speed. You move fast or you get left behind." I'd asked if he could come with me to my cousin's wedding. He said no before I'd even finished the question. "It's demo week," he said. You think I can drop everything to go to a barn in Vermont? That was the first family event he missed. It wasn't the last. My parents started asking questions gently at first. Is everything okay with Aaron? We haven't seen him in a while. I said he was busy. That the app was in a big growth phase. It wasn't exactly a lie. MintLink had started getting attention. A mid-tier venture blog featured them in a startups to watch list. One of Aaron's team members posted about a beta user milestone. His name was getting out there. I was proud of him. But the more attention the app got, the more Aaron seemed to forget the version of life we had built together. He stopped mentioning me in conversations with people outside our circle. At a friend's party, someone asked if we were married, and he laughed. Actually laughed, before saying, "Yeah, technically, she's the stable one." I pulled him aside later. What was that supposed to mean? He shrugged. Nothing. Don't make it a thing. It wasn't just what he said. It was how easily he dismissed me. Like I was being difficult for having feelings at all. His phone became an extension of his body. Constant texts, Slack pings, calendar alerts. I understood the pressure of being in a high-growth phase, but he started taking calls during dinner, muting the TV during movies to answer a Discord ping, staying up until 2 a.m. on with the dev team in Estonia. I asked if he wanted help, if he needed someone to look over a funding pitch or a project timeline. He told me, "This isn't the kind of thing you can organize with a spreadsheet." I was the one who paid for his LLC filing. I built the original cash flow template for the first 6 months. I'd pitched in with the early branding, the email copy, the launch announcement. But somehow, I was now on the outside of something I helped him build. Then came the dinners. The first one was at a rooftop restaurant I'd never heard of. He said it was a networking thing, but when he posted a picture to his Instagram story, it wasn't just founders. It was a group of glossy-looking people, PR reps, product influencers, a couple of startup models who do paid content for equity. One of them had their arm around him in the photo. When I asked about it, he rolled his eyes. You know how these events are. Everyone takes pictures with everyone. It's all about clout. But I noticed he didn't tag me anymore. Not in anything. Not even when MintLink was profiled in a startup digest that mentioned the company's origin story. He told the writer it had started in a moment of total risk and independence. No mention of the loan I gave him or the bills I covered that first year. No sign that I'd ever been a part of it. One night, I came home from work and the apartment was empty. No note, no message. Just his laptop gone and his sneakers missing from the front mat. At 10 p.m., I texted him, "Are you okay?" An hour later, "Sorry. Last-minute drinks with investors. Don't wait up." It kept happening. He'd disappear for hours. Then nights. He'd claim it was work, always work. Demo prep, investor calls, product meetings. I told myself to believe him. That the tech world was unpredictable. That I was being paranoid. That this was the price of success. But then I found the receipts. Literally. Receipts. In his coat pocket, at the bottom of the hamper. Dinner for 2 at a wine bar across town. 2 glasses of Barolo. A shared dessert. Not his usual solo order of tacos and whiskey. This wasn't a business meeting. When I brought it up, he said it was a client. That I shouldn't snoop through his pockets. That if I didn't trust him, maybe I was the problem. I didn't push it. Not that night. A few weeks later, I saw a photo on someone else's social feed. A girl I didn't recognize. Young, styled, posing in front of a branded step and repeat at a product launch I hadn't heard about. Aaron was behind her in the crowd. Not a big deal, except he told me he was at an offsite all weekend. I asked him about it the next day. Calmly. Just, weren't you supposed to be at the offsite? He didn't miss a beat. That was the offsite. They had some crossover with the launch crowd. We were testing integrations. What are you implying? I didn't have a good answer. I wasn't even sure what I was accusing him of. But I knew something had shifted. I was no longer someone he shared things with. I was someone he updated. Selectively. Vaguely. If at all. I stopped mentioning family dinners. Stopped asking him to RSVP to weddings or holidays. It felt easier than pretending he might show up. At Thanksgiving, my mother asked if he was traveling. I said yes. I didn't mention that I had no idea where he actually was. The final straw didn't feel final when it happened. It was a Saturday. I got home from the grocery store and found Aaron on the phone in the kitchen. He didn't hear me come in. He was laughing louder than usual. He said, "Yeah, she's great for logistics. Like a built-in operations team, super dependable." He paused, then added, "But emotionally? Kind of. Flat, you know?" He turned and saw me standing there, eyes wide, pale. He ended the call quickly. "That wasn't about you." I didn't respond. That night, I laid awake in bed next to him, listening to his even breath, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my parents and how my dad always put his hand on my mom's lower back when they crossed the street together, not in a performative way, just as habit, as care. Aaron hadn't touched me in days. Not a kiss goodbye, not a hand on my shoulder when I passed him a coffee mug. Nothing. I didn't leave him. Not then. I wasn't ready to admit what was happening. But I stopped asking where he was going, stopped offering help. I turned my energy inward, toward work, my friends, my routines. I pulled back quietly, the way you do when you know a conversation is coming that's going to change everything. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did. But by then, we were both pretending too hard to admit it. I was coming out of a quarterly review meeting at work when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya, a friend I hadn't spoken to in a while, but someone who knew both Aaron and me from back when we all used to attend the same startup mixers and charity events. Her message was short. "Hey, didn't know you and Aaron split. Saw him at the Flux panel today with someone. Looked serious. Just wanted to check in." I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to process what she meant. We hadn't split. Not officially. Not at all. I replied with a simple, "What do you mean?" A minute later, she sent a photo. Grainy, probably taken at a distance, but clear enough. Aaron standing next to a younger woman. Brunette, sharp blazer, one arm casually looped through his. They looked comfortable, familiar. Like this wasn't the first time they'd stood that close in public. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. Not because I was shocked, but because the confirmation left no room for the story I'd been telling myself. That we were going through a rough patch. That we just needed space. That he was overwhelmed, not absent. I took the rest of the day off without explanation. Walked straight home in a fog, barely remembering the train ride. When I opened the apartment door, I heard music playing from the speaker in our bedroom. Jazz. Not the playlist we shared, but something newer, sleeker. I followed the sound and found Aaron sitting on the edge of the bed, typing something on his laptop, earbuds in. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood in the doorway and asked, "Who is she?" He didn't even flinch. Took out one earbud, set the laptop aside like I'd interrupted a podcast, not an entire second life. "Who?" he asked, feigning confusion. "The woman you were with at the Flux event." There was a pause. Half a breath. Maybe less. Then he said it. Flat. Unapologetic. "Mara. She's a strategist. We've been seeing each other." I felt my stomach turn, but I kept my voice even. "For how long?" Another pause. "A couple months." Just like that. A couple months. I remember leaning against the doorframe because my legs suddenly felt unsteady. "You've been in a relationship with someone else for months, and you didn't think that was something I should know?" He stood up and rubbed the back of his neck, like this was a performance review, and he was about to explain missed metrics. "Amelia," he said carefully, "we've grown apart, you have to see that. We've been living parallel lives for a while now. You didn't tell me we were ending." "I thought it was obvious," he said. "We haven't been, us, for a long time." I asked him, "Did you plan to tell me? Or was I supposed to just find out when you posted a couple photo?" He looked annoyed by the question. "I wasn't hiding anything. I just didn't want to have a dramatic scene. You hate drama. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not because of the cheating, that was horrible, but because of the way he talked to me. Like I was an employee being let go. Like our life had been a project he was phasing out. You're unbelievable, I said. I supported you when you had nothing. I put my name on loans. I let you take my savings. And you couldn't even give me the decency of a conversation? He sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. I'm sorry if you feel blindsided, but we need to be adults about this. I can help you get settled somewhere else. I know the lease is under my name, but I can give you a few weeks. Help me get settled? I repeated. You think I need help from you? He shrugged. I'm just trying to make this clean. No apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the betrayal. Just logistics. I packed a bag that night, not because I didn't have a right to stay, but because I couldn't breathe in that apartment anymore. Every corner of it was stained with a version of our life that clearly only I'd been holding on to. I moved into a small sublet owned by a friend of a friend, barely furnished, 1 bedroom, no elevator. I didn't tell many people at first. Just Maya and my coworker Lena, who brought me groceries the first night and didn't ask questions. The next week, I saw it on social media. Aaron and Mara. A photo of them at a networking dinner, arms linked, smiling under string lights. The caption read, "Incredible night with the best partner, professionally and otherwise." I stared at the screen, feeling everything and nothing all at once. The woman he left me for was 26. She worked in branding for a boutique agency. She posted about hustle culture and slow fashion. Her bio included the phrase story-driven design. And yet, it wasn't her that made me angry. It was him. He had recast himself as a solo success story. No mention of the years I'd spent quietly stabilizing his world so he could chase a dream. No gratitude. No legacy of the effort we'd shared. He moved on before I knew we were done. I kept the betrayal to myself at first. My parents didn't know. My brother didn't know. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. But Lena sat with me one night, both of us on my borrowed couch with takeout containers balanced on our laps, and she asked, "Do you think he ever understood what you gave up for him?" I shook my head. He never really saw me. Not once he started seeing himself differently. She nodded. Then you lost nothing. That line stayed with me. The apartment was quiet most nights. I had trouble sleeping. I started walking after work just to fill the hours. Eventually, I picked up a freelance operations project for a local nonprofit. Just something to keep my skills sharp. Meanwhile, Aaron kept posting. New office, new pitch deck. A brand refresh. Weekend getaways with Mara. I watched it all from a distance, trying to figure out how long I had been invisible to the man I thought I knew. The hardest part wasn't losing the relationship. It was realizing I had already been alone in it for a long time. And that he hadn't left me for someone else. He'd left me for a different version of himself. One I had no place in. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want closure. What I wanted, what I needed, was to take everything he overlooked and build something so solid, so unmistakably mine, that no one could ever erase me from the story again. I didn't know then what would come. But the seed of it started there, in that quiet apartment, with a half-eaten dinner and a long, hard look at what I was done tolerating. I didn't fall apart, but I did disappear for a while. Not dramatically, just enough that no one would expect much from me for a bit. My parents were shocked when I told them Aaron and I had separated. We were at their kitchen table, the one I'd eaten at every Sunday for most of my childhood, and my mother's hands went straight to her mouth. "Oh, Amelia," she whispered, like someone had died. They had loved him, almost embarrassingly so. My father used to call him the son I never had, until Paul finally told him to knock it off. Even when Aaron started skipping holidays, even when he barely made eye contact during family dinners, they chalked it up to stress. My mother defended him right up until the end. "He's just under pressure, sweetheart. All that tech world noise. He'll come around." When I told her the truth, that he'd been with someone else for months, her expression changed. She didn't ask questions. She just reached across the table and held my hand. That was all I needed. My father wasn't as graceful. He got angry, then silent, then angry again. "You gave that boy everything," he said later, standing in the backyard, pacing in that way he does when he doesn't know what to do with his hands. "How dare he treat you like that?" It was strange hearing it said so plainly. I had spent so long minimizing the imbalance, telling myself love was a cycle, that it was normal to carry someone for a while, that someday he'd do the same for me. But hearing my dad spell it out like that, I couldn't deny it anymore. I had given Aaron everything. Not just money, though that was part of it. The inheritance from my grandmother, the rent I paid when he couldn't, the emergency dentist visit that I covered without question. But it wasn't just that. It was time, support, emotional labor, professional credit, the kind of behind-the-scenes effort that doesn't show up on paper but makes someone else's success possible. I'd written his first pitch deck, helped him run mock interviews when he was meeting with VCs, edited his bios for applications. I can still remember ironing his shirt at 6 a.m. before his first big panel and watching him forget to thank me in the press interview he gave later that afternoon. Now that I was out of it, really out of it, I started making a list, not on paper, but mentally, of everything I'd set aside for him. A graduate program I never applied to. A promotion I declined because it would have moved us to Chicago and he wasn't in a place to relocate. The wedding gift money we used to pay off his credit card debt. The trip to Lisbon I'd planned for my 30th that turned into a staycation because the app needed one more quarter. I hadn't even noticed how much I'd stopped asking for, or how small I'd made myself to keep him from feeling threatened. My friend Lena, my colleague, technically, but really more of a quiet champion, kept checking in. Not in a pushy way, just little things. A coffee left on my desk, a text when I worked late. One afternoon she stopped by my office door and said, "There's a leadership retreat coming up next month. Mostly directors and team leads, but I think you'd get a lot out of it. No pressure. Just come if you want." I hadn't said yes to much in weeks, but something about the way she said it, gently, without expectation, made me say, "Send me the link." The retreat was 2 hours outside Boston, at one of those quiet, overpriced inns that tries very hard to look rustic. The kind of place with bare wood floors and tea that costs $9. I almost canceled. But I'd already paid the registration fee, and I didn't want to explain to Lena why I'd backed out. The first night was awkward. Everyone was more senior than me, or at least acted like they were. They used phrases like executive presence and stakeholder friction, without irony. I almost left after the welcome dinner. But then, on the second day, during a workshop exercise, someone asked what I was most proud of professionally. I started talking about a logistics rework I'd led last year that saved the company nearly $200,000 annually. I'd built the model, pitched it, rolled it out. I hadn't thought about it in a while. As I spoke, people started nodding. Someone asked a follow-up question, and another person added, "You should present that at the Regional Ops Summit." I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd talked about my work without shrinking it, without downplaying it to make someone else feel bigger. It was disorienting, being heard without tension, but it was freeing too. After the session, a woman named Celeste pulled me aside. She worked for a logistics firm out of Chicago and asked if I ever considered consulting. "You have that blend," she said. "Technical mind, but clear communication. It's rare." I laughed it off at the time, but I didn't forget it. Back at the rental, I started reclaiming space in my own life. I rearranged the furniture, bought new sheets, cooked meals Aaron would have called boring. I stopped watching his social media, deleted the alerts. When Mara posted a photo of the two of them at a wine bar downtown, I scrolled past it without reacting. That felt like progress. Some nights were hard. The silence was heavier than I expected. I'd wake up and forget, for half a second, that the person who used to sleep beside me had chosen someone else. But the ache dulled, eventually. And in its place, something else started to take root. A few weeks after the retreat, I got an email from a former colleague who'd gone freelance. She was drowning in projects and asked if I had time to take on a contract. Just part-time. Short-term. I said yes. Not because I needed the money. I still had a full-time job, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to build something on my own terms. Lena found out and sent me a post-it that read, "This is how it starts." She was right. The Aaron chapter wasn't over yet. I knew there were still intersections ahead. Mutual friends, shared acquaintances, public events, but I was finally starting to see the distance. Not just physical, but emotional, professional, ethical. He hadn't just left me for someone else. He'd left himself too, the version of him that could coexist with a woman who didn't disappear. And I wasn't interested in chasing either of them. I was done disappearing. 6 months after the papers were signed, Aaron emailed me. The subject line was just one word: talk? It landed in my inbox on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing vendor contracts and finalizing end-of-quarter numbers. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The message was short, no greeting. Just a paragraph that read like a press release, stripped of polish. Things have gotten complicated. The app hit some unexpected issues. Couple investors pulled out, and the market shifted. Mara moved to LA last month. It's been a lot. I'd really appreciate a conversation if you're open to it. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what he had done, no mention of the way he'd left or the silence that followed. Just a vague reference to turbulence and a request for my time, like he was still entitled to it. I didn't respond. I read it twice, closed the tab, then added a line to my to-do list for the day: clean up inbox. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and deleted the entire folder I'd once labeled Aaron Docs. It held everything: our lease, our wedding photos, the scanned bank statements from the months I was covering both our expenses, and a Google Doc titled Q3 Strategy Mint Link that I'd helped him draft and never got credit for. I emptied the trash, finished my wine, and made a new document. One that started with a list of grad programs I'd been considering before our relationship had swallowed all my ambition. I applied to 3 executive MBA programs over the next month. Quietly. No announcements. No Instagram posts about big moves or Chapter 2. Just a series of forms, essays, and late-night research while the rest of the city slept. Around the same time, a restructuring project opened up at work. It was messy. 3 departments being consolidated under one operations lead, and no one eager to touch it. I asked for it. My manager hesitated. "It's a lot," she said. "High visibility. A lot of exposure. If it goes wrong." "I want it," I said. "I can handle it." She gave me 2 weeks to build a transition plan. I delivered it in 4 days. By the end of the quarter, the project was mine. Meanwhile, Aaron kept trying. 2 more emails. 1 voicemail. I didn't respond to any of them. It wasn't out of spite. I just didn't see the value in reopening a door I'd already reinforced and bolted shut. Then, in early March, I got an invitation to a networking gala downtown. One of those multi-industry things that tries to pair venture capital with nonprofit work, with panelists who say things like impact scaling and funding ecosystems. I almost skipped it. But Lena convinced me. "You've been head down for 6 months, go be seen." So I went, wore a navy dress I hadn't touched since the divorce. Clean lines, nothing flashy, just enough to feel like I'd arrived with purpose. The ballroom was loud, crowded, but after an hour, I found a rhythm, talking to people in short, focused bursts, nodding when appropriate, collecting business cards I'd never use. I was about to leave when someone asked if I was in line for the bar. I wasn't, but I turned anyway. He was tall, well-dressed, a little older than me, the kind of man who seemed completely at ease in a room full of strangers. "No, but I'll pretend if it gets me out of another conversation about AI and workforce logistics," I said. He smiled. "Let me guess, you work in operations." "Guilty." I'm Daniel. He extended a hand. I don't know what I do anymore officially. Mostly consulting, sometimes investing. Depends on who's asking. We talked for 10 minutes that night, then again over coffee the next week. And again at a jazz bar Lena recommended that neither of us had heard of. It wasn't fast. It wasn't charged with false intimacy. It was just easy. Like breathing. I didn't Google him for the first month. I wanted to know him before I knew about him. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Turns out, Daniel had sold a logistics platform 6 years ago for more than I would make in 20 lifetimes. Quietly. No headlines, no bragging rights. When I brought it up, he laughed. That was another life. Now I mostly figure out what not to do next. He never tried to impress me, never dropped names, never made me feel like I had to earn his time. We moved slowly. Dinners, walks, long conversations without distraction. It was the first time I'd been in a relationship where I didn't feel like I had to explain myself or shrink to fit someone else's shadow. By June, I had been accepted into a part-time executive MBA program and received a department-wide promotion at work. I told Daniel over brunch. He raised his glass and said, "Knew it." It was around then that my parents announced plans for their 50th wedding anniversary. A backyard party, catered, tent rental, 70 people, maybe 80. Extended family, neighbors, old friends. My mother mailed out paper invitations, even though she texts emojis like a teenager. I got mine the same week Aaron sent his final email. Just one line this time. Hope to see you at the anniversary. I'll be there. Of course he would. He and my parents had stayed cordial, polite. They hadn't invited him, but they hadn't excluded him either. I didn't blame them. I hadn't told them everything. Only enough. I debated bringing Daniel. It wasn't nerves exactly, just calculation. I didn't want it to feel performative, like I was trying to make a point. When I brought it up, Daniel said, "I'll come if you want me there, but you don't owe anyone a show." That was all I needed. I said yes. 2 weeks later, we pulled into my parents' driveway together. He brought a bottle of red wine from a vineyard I'd never heard of. My mom hugged him like she already knew him. My dad offered him a beer. I caught Aaron watching from across the lawn. He was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely in control of the story. Not because I'd planned some kind of grand reveal, but because I no longer needed one. Aaron arrived before us. According to my cousin Mia, he showed up early, like unnecessarily early, and made a point of being seen. She said he stood near the drinks table, talking louder than anyone needed to, recalling stories from when he was still part of the family, as he put it. That was his phrase. Still part of the family. My parents hadn't told me he was coming. I don't think they knew how to bring it up. And I understood why. They'd loved him once. And people like Aaron have a way of making you feel like being uncomfortable around them is your problem to solve. When Daniel and I pulled in, the lawn was already full. Round tables under a rented tent. Small kids chasing each other around the grill. Folding chairs, forming little circles of older relatives catching up after years apart. It was one of those perfect early summer days. Warm but not sticky, with a breeze just strong enough to keep the napkins from flying away. We walked in side by side. Daniel in a tailored navy suit, nothing flashy, but clearly expensive. He carried the bottle of wine like it was an afterthought. I introduced him to my mother first. She looked up at him, then back at me, then gave me a look I'd seen maybe 3 times in my life. Once when I got into Northeastern, once when I told her I'd bought my first apartment, and now, she hugged him like he'd always belonged. My dad came over next. "Daniel, right?" he said, shaking his hand firmly. "Amelia says you used to do logistics. You miss it?" Daniel grinned. "Depends on the day." They started talking about distribution challenges and supply chain workarounds like they'd known each other for years. I caught a glimpse of Aaron out of the corner of my eye. He was standing near the side of the tent, next to one of my uncles. holding a beer and half smiling through someone else's story. When he saw me, he did a double take. His face changed in stages: surprise, confusion, something else. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I just kept walking. Later, Mia told me that 10 minutes before we arrived, someone had asked Aaron if he was seeing anyone. He'd smirked and said, "I don't know what Amelia's up to these days. Probably still finding herself." She said it like a warning. I just nodded. It didn't bother me the way it once would have. That version of me, the one who would have tried to correct the record or prove herself, was gone, replaced by someone who didn't need to engage. Daniel stayed close without hovering. He introduced himself when appropriate, listened more than he talked, and let me lead every interaction. I saw a few people glance between us, putting pieces together. Some looked surprised. Others looked quietly pleased. My Aunt Ruth pulled me aside near the dessert table. "He's lovely," she said. "And different." "How so?" She took a sip of her iced tea. "Aaron always had something to prove. This one looks like he already knows who he is." Aaron eventually made his way over. It was inevitable. We were standing near the side fence, watching one of the neighbor's kids try to climb a folding chair. Daniel had just stepped away to talk to my dad again. Aaron cleared his throat. "Hey!" I turned. "Hi." He looked me over, then gestured vaguely toward the wine bottle on the table. "Bringing the rare vintages now?" I didn't answer. He tried again. "You look good." "Thanks." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Didn't know you'd be bringing someone." "You didn't ask." He nodded slowly, like he was weighing whether to keep going. "Your parents still talk about you like you're 22. Guess I shouldn't be surprised you found a guy with real money. That must be nice." I stayed quiet for a second, then said, "It is." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just silence. Aaron shifted, uncomfortable. "You know, I'm rebuilding. Things got rocky for a while, but the core platform's still good. I've got some advisors interested." I didn't ask for details. He added, "Mara's doing something with design in California now. Long distance didn't make sense." I said, "That's not my business." He studied me for a moment. "You're different." I met his eyes. "No, you just stopped recognizing me a long time ago." He didn't know what to do with that. Daniel returned a few minutes later, casual as ever. He asked me if I wanted water. I said yes. We walked back toward the tent without looking back. I don't know what Aaron told people after that, but I know what they saw. They saw a version of me that didn't need to justify her place anymore. That night, after the tent had emptied and my parents were packing up the last of the centerpieces, my mom pulled me aside. She said, "That man loves you. I can tell. It's not loud, but it's there." I smiled. "It's the kind of quiet I've been waiting for." She squeezed my hand. "Then don't let it go." I stood in the driveway for a while after that, watching as Daniel helped my dad carry folding chairs back into the garage. There was no show, no performance, just simple gestures, just care. Aaron had always needed an audience. Daniel didn't seem to care who was watching. It hit me then, not just how far I'd come, but how far I'd been willing to go to hold on to something that wasn't real. And how different it felt now to be building something with someone who didn't need saving, explaining, or ego management. Something rooted, steady. I hadn't just moved on from Aaron. I'd stepped fully into a life that had nothing to do with him. And he knew it. It was late by the time the last of the tables had been folded, the leftover cupcakes packed into take-home containers, and the string lights unplugged from the tent poles. Most of the guests had gone. A few relatives lingered by the driveway, trading slow goodbyes and promises to catch up more often. My mom was inside, insisting people take bottles of sparkling water from the fridge, and my dad was in the garage with Daniel, talking tools like they were long-lost shop owners. I was standing near the back porch, arms crossed against the cool evening air, watching the wind tug gently at the edge of the tent fabric, when Aaron walked up. I saw him coming. He wasn't moving with purpose, exactly. More like someone unsure if the door was open, but deciding to check anyway. He stopped a few feet from me. You look. He searched for the word. Different. I gave a small nod. It's been a while. He stuffed his hands in his pockets again. Same nervous gesture I remembered from college. You handled yourself well tonight. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what there was to say to that. It wasn't a performance. There had been nothing to manage except showing up honestly. He waited a second, then added, You know, I still think about that time we talked about starting something together. That co-working concept. You were gonna run ops, and I was gonna pitch VC. I gave a short, tired smile. I did start something. You just didn't notice. That quieted him. I thought he might push back, try to argue that it wasn't fair, that he was under stress back then, that I hadn't understood how hard it was to build something from scratch. But he didn't. He looked out at the lawn instead, the patch of grass where kids had played tag all afternoon, now scattered with paper cups and half-deflated balloons. I didn't know how to show up for you, he said. I thought building something meant chasing the next thing. I didn't see what was already there. I didn't answer. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't owe him anything either. He glanced down, scuffed the heel of his shoe against the gravel. It's weird, isn't it? Being around all these people again? Your dad still talks about you like you're 25 and saving the world. He's proud, I said. He should be. He hesitated. Daniel seems like a good guy. He is. He nodded slowly. Does he know what he has? That one made me look at him. Not because of the words, but the tone. There wasn't bitterness in it, just something softer. Not quite regret. Not quite understanding. Somewhere in between. He knows, I said, and I don't have to remind him. Aaron let out a quiet breath. I thought there would always be time. To fix things. Or at least explain them. I didn't respond to that either. Some explanations come too late to matter. We stood there in silence for a while. Not awkward exactly. Just filled with the weight of what wasn't said. What never got said. Eventually, he turned to go. Well, see you around, Amelia. I didn't say goodbye. He walked back toward his car alone, and I watched him shrink into the shadows cast by the porch light. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. The truth is, there wasn't going to be some grand closure, no dramatic confrontation, no apology that suddenly rewrote everything. I wasn't interested in rewriting. I was interested in moving forward. Aaron and I are civil now. That's the word I use when people ask. We've run into each other a few times since the party. Once at a local fundraiser. Once at a shared friend's art opening. We nod. Maybe say hello. That's it. I don't avoid him. But I don't invite anything either. That distance is intentional. Not out of spite, but because I know what I become when I try to bridge gaps that aren't mine to close. I shrink. I overfunction. I forgive too soon and too fully. I forget to protect myself. With Daniel, I don't do that. I don't have to. When I told him about that last conversation with Aaron, he didn't gloat or say, I told you so. He just listened, and when I was done, he said, Sounds like you handled it the only way it could be handled. It's easy to trust someone who doesn't make you earn their respect in installments. There's no redemption arc here. Not for Aaron. Maybe he's learned something. Maybe not. But that's not my story to track. What matters is that I rebuilt my life without keeping space for a return. The door's not open. Not even a crack. And that decision, that boundary, isn't about resentment. It's about clarity. A year after my parents' anniversary party, Daniel and I were sitting on our balcony with coffee, his black, mine full of oat milk and cinnamon, when he slid a small velvet box across the table. No dramatic speech, no spectacle, just a warm smile, and it felt like the right time. The ring was understated and elegant. Platinum band, single diamond, flawless but not oversized. Very Daniel. It wasn't the stone that made me pause, it was what it represented. Not a rescue, not a rebranding, but a partnership. He didn't ask me to change. He never has. What he gave me, more than anything, was space to be fully myself. No editing, no shrinking. When we told my parents, my mother cried. Not in the dramatic way she used to when I brought home awards or told her I'd been promoted. This was quieter. Like some small anxious knot inside her had finally let go. My dad hugged Daniel longer than I expected, then said something about finally having someone to talk to about impact drills without getting blank stares. It was the kind of celebration that didn't need big announcements or curated photos. We told people gradually, kept it intimate, a few friends, family, no Instagram post, just shared moments. Work is better than it's ever been. I'm leading a cross-functional operations initiative now, something that spans 3 departments and reports directly to the C-suite. It's not flashy work. No one writes press releases about strategic audits or process streamlining. But the numbers don't lie. We're leaner, faster, and more efficient than we were a year ago. I got my graduate program acceptance letter in March. Part-time, mostly evening classes, but the kind of curriculum I'd wanted for years. Strategy, innovation, behavioral economics. I started last fall. I'm exhausted sometimes, but I've never felt more present in my own life. Aaron, I've heard, is consulting now. A friend of a friend mentioned he was helping early-stage founders avoid burnout scaling. Ironic, considering he once told me I wasn't cut out for the pace of the startup world. From what I gather, he still moves in loud circles. Events, panels, dinners with people who say disruption, like it's a mission statement. I've seen his name pop up here and there, on LinkedIn, in speaker lists, on the occasional byline in some founder newsletter. We haven't spoken since that night. There's nothing left to say. Looking back, I don't feel rage. Not anymore. There was a time I imagined justice as some dramatic reveal, a moment where he'd see me thriving and fall to pieces with regret. But that kind of closure doesn't exist. The real justice was never about him. It was in the quiet rebuilding, the conversations with mentors who reminded me of my value, the nights I spent redrafting applications I'd once abandoned, the morning walks with Daniel where we talked about joint bank accounts and prenups like adults who trust each other. It was in realizing that nothing about my steadiness was ever a flaw. Aaron used to say I was too safe, too predictable. But what I've learned is that people who call you predictable are often the ones who benefited most from your stability. And when they lose it, they don't know how to stand on their own. I do. I learned early, too early maybe, that being the dependable one means you'll be underestimated, that when you're calm in a crisis, people assume you don't feel the fire, that when you give without conditions, they forget it cost you something. But I've also learned this. You don't have to apologize for being steady. You just have to stop giving that steadiness to people who can't meet it. My story didn't end with heartbreak. It didn't even end with the engagement. It kept going. In conference rooms where my voice finally carried. In classrooms where I didn't second-guess my seat. In dinners with Daniel where we split the check not because we had to, but because we both like the symmetry of it. I still think about the version of me that stayed too long, that compromised too much, that waited for someone to change when all the evidence said they wouldn't. But I don't judge her. She got me here. She's the reason I can now walk into a room without explaining my worth and leave without worrying what people think. She's the reason I recognize real partnership when I see it. So if you ask me what came of it, what came of all the patience, all the sacrifice, all the years spent holding someone else's ambition together, I'll tell you this: clarity and peace. And a life I built without asking anyone's permission. Sometimes, the loudest answer is the one you don't shout. It's the calm voice that says, I'm done. It's the silence when you don't reply. It's the steady rhythm of rebuilding, on your terms, in your time. And it's more than enough. Thanks for sticking with me through the end. If you've ever been in a relationship where you gave everything and got left behind the moment it was convenient, know this: You're not weak for giving, but you are strong for walking away. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone let you down? What helped you move forward? Drop your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. And if this resonated with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true stories about boundaries, growth, and quiet comebacks. You're not alone.